The flight attendant's voice cut through the cabin, rising sharply enough for everyone to hear. "I'm going to ask you one last time, move to the back of the plane or I will call security." Her words rang with an icy edge, dripping with condescension, her tone a weapon meant to assert control. Naomi Williams, a calm and composed black woman in her late 30s, lifted her gaze from the window. Her expression remained serene, almost serene enough to disarm. "I've already told you, I'm not moving," she responded, her words simple, yet firm. Her voice, steady and unwavering, carried an undeniable weight, one that commanded attention. There was no trace of fear in her demeanor, no sign of distress. She had been humiliated in front of the other passengers, but no one could have predicted what would happen next. The woman they assumed was powerless was about to reveal just how wrong they were. Before we dive deeper into this tale, if you believe everyone should be treated with respect regardless of their background, click the subscribe button and let us know where you're watching from. The plane itself was a gleaming symbol of luxury, its sleek design reflecting the afternoon sun like a precious gem. Inside, the opulence matched its exterior, plush leather seats, gleaming gold accents, and an atmosphere of exclusivity that made everyone inside feel like royalty. Passengers moved with a quiet grace, their designer luggage rolling smoothly behind them as they made their way toward the private jet parked on the tarmac. Soon they were settled in, some scrolling through their devices, others leisurely sipping champagne served by an attentive flight crew. The hum of ambient music filled the air as the atmosphere inside was a carefully crafted oasis of calm and privilege. Among the passengers sat Naomi Williams. Dressed in a perfectly tailored navy blazer and matching slacks, she exuded understated elegance. Her every movement spoke of quiet confidence, though she made no effort to draw attention to herself. Naomi wasn't here for attention. She was here on a mission, overseeing her growing empire. She had learned long ago that power often lay in restraint, though at this moment, no one on board knew who she was. Naomi preferred it that way. Lauren, the lead flight attendant, stood near the entrance. Her crisp uniform was a perfect reflection of her controlled demeanor, and her sharp features were a constant reminder that she was in charge. Her welcoming smile was practiced, almost mechanical, and for Naomi, it was noticeably colder. Naomi observed her quietly as the others filed in, each passenger receiving their warm greeting, save for Naomi, who received only a terse acknowledgement. "Welcome aboard," Lauren said, her voice a little colder than the others, as if Naomi was somehow less deserving of pleasantries. Naomi glanced briefly over her shoulder, noticing the difference in Lauren's treatment of other passengers. Mr. and Mrs. Raymond, a couple in their 60s, were greeted with a brightness that Naomi had not received. Lauren's smile was wide and genuine as she greeted them. "Good morning, Mr. and Mrs. Raymond. Lovely to have you with us again." Naomi's expression remained calm, but her sharp eyes registered the silent, unspoken dynamics at play. As passengers settled in, Lauren weaved her way through the cabin, ensuring all was in place. When she reached the Raymonds, she offered them an exaggeratedly polite smile. "Is there anything I can get for you before we take off?" Mrs. Raymond shook her head politely, already absorbed in her knitting, while Mr. Raymond gave a slight nod toward his coffee, signaling his satisfaction. But when Lauren reached Naomi, her demeanor shifted once again. Naomi's bag sat neatly under her seat, but Lauren's eyes narrowed slightly. Without a word, Lauren passed Naomi by, offering neither a smile nor any form of courtesy. Have you ever been in a situation where someone treated you differently based on your appearance? Share your experience in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this. Lauren Reed, in her early 40s, was a woman who prided herself on precision. Her uniform was immaculate, her hair perfectly styled, and her attitude sharp enough to cut glass. Appearances were everything to Lauren, and her judgments were swift, unapologetic, and almost always influenced by the way people looked. Something about Naomi set her on edge, though. Naomi didn't look like the usual passengers Lauren catered to. Her calm self-assurance, her quiet elegance, none of it fit the mold of who Lauren believed belonged in the exclusive section of the plane. Lauren approached Naomi, her heels clicking sharply against the floor. Her lips curled into a tight, almost patronizing smile. "Excuse me, ma'am?" she said, her voice polite but dripping with disdain. I think you're in the wrong section. Naomi looked up slowly, her gaze steady. I believe this is my seat, she replied simply, her tone measured and firm. Lauren's smile didn't waver, but there was a sudden edge to her voice. I don't think so. This section is reserved for our elite passengers. As the conversation escalated, passengers began to take notice. A nosy socialite sitting nearby leaned slightly to get a better view. Her curiosity piqued. A businessman across the aisle raised an eyebrow, frowning at Lauren's tone. Naomi remained unfazed, her eyes steady. You might want to double-check the passenger list before making assumptions, she said, her voice calm but resolute. Lauren's eyebrows shot up in disbelief. Her irritation was palpable. I don't need to check anything, she snapped. I know who belongs here and who doesn't. A few passengers exchanged glances, whispers rippling through the cabin. One muttered, Why doesn't she just move? While another shrugged. She's probably just trying to sneak in for a free upgrade. Lauren, not backing down, crossed her arms and raised her voice. If you don't move to the back of the plane, I'll have to call security. Naomi tilted her head slightly, her expression unwavering. Call whoever you need to, she said softly, her words carrying more weight than Lauren had anticipated. The tension in the cabin thickened as Lauren turned to the junior flight attendant, Grace, who stood nearby, watching nervously. Grace, Lauren snapped, escort her to the back now. Grace hesitated, her eyes flickering between Naomi and Lauren. She wanted to speak up, wanted to suggest checking the passenger list, just as Naomi had suggested. But the venomous glare Lauren shot her silenced her. With a reluctant nod, Grace stepped forward. Naomi, still calm and composed, shifted slightly in her seat. You might want to think carefully about what you're doing, she said quietly, her words carrying a quiet but powerful warning. Lauren scoffed, dismissing Naomi's words with a wave of her hand. I know exactly what I'm doing, she retorted, gesturing for Naomi to stand. Now get up. As the passengers watched, the tension in the air became almost tangible. Naomi remained seated, her gaze unwavering as she responded simply, I'm not moving. The nosy socialite, her perfectly coiffed hair and air of entitlement all too obvious, leaned toward her companion, whispering loudly enough for others to hear. Looks like she's trying to sneak in for a free ride. Lauren's smirk returned as she seized on the comment, addressing the other passengers. That's exactly what it looks like, she said, turning to the crowd, as if rallying them behind her. We have rules for a reason. Some people just don't respect them. Naomi didn't respond to the whispers or the insults. Instead, her gaze remained steady on Lauren, her quiet defiance a louder statement than any words could express. As the tension mounted, Grace hesitated, moving toward the passenger list clipped near the cockpit door. Her fingers trembled as she searched the names, hoping for something that might help Naomi. But before she could speak, Lauren's voice sliced through the air. Grace, what are you doing? She barked, her tone harsh. I was just checking, Grace murmured, barely above a whisper. Lauren interrupted her with a sharp command. I've got this under control. You don't need to get involved. Grace stepped back, her face flushed with embarrassment. She bit her lip, torn between doing the right thing and the fear of losing her job. Just as the scene reached its boiling point, a calm, kind-looking man seated across the aisle leaned forward, his expression a blend of concern and curiosity. He smiled at Naomi. Excuse me, he said gently, his voice warm. Is everything all right? Naomi turned toward the businessman, her expression softening as she acknowledged his quiet gesture of support. I'm fine, thank you, she replied, her voice steady but touched with gratitude for his small act of kindness. Before the businessman could speak further, Lauren's voice sliced through the air, sharp and accusatory. I'd appreciate it if you didn't encourage this disturbance, she snapped, her eyes narrowing as she turned back to Naomi. Pointing a finger at her, she added, You're causing a scene. The businessman, who had been quietly observing, frowned at Lauren's tone. From where I'm sitting, he said in a calm, measured voice, You're the one making a scene. Lauren's face flushed with anger, her composure unraveling. She turned her attention back to Naomi, her voice trembling with fury. "I've had enough of this," she snapped, stepping closer. "Either you move, or I'll make sure you're escorted off this plane." Naomi met her gaze without flinching. "You can try," she said softly, her words dripping with quiet defiance. Lauren's frustration boiled over. Her voice shook as she leaned in closer, practically spitting the words at Naomi. "Why don't you just admit you're in the wrong?" Naomi said nothing, her silence only fueling Lauren's rage. After a moment of tense stillness, Lauren finally turned away, her anger still simmering as she moved down the aisle to carry out her other duties. Her polished shoes clicked briskly against the carpet, a staccato rhythm that matched her mounting frustration. She walked with purpose, her expression tight as she carried a tray of sparkling water. Her professional demeanor barely masked the seething anger beneath, her eyes darting back toward Naomi as though daring her to challenge her again. Meanwhile, Naomi sat quietly in her seat, her attention focused on the book in her hands, her calm presence a sharp contrast to the tension around her. The passengers spoke in hushed tones, chatting softly, but the air was thick with discomfort. Naomi had been waiting patiently for a drink, watching as Lauren served Mr. and Mrs. Raymond first, moving toward the rear of the plane without so much as acknowledging Naomi. As the tray grew lighter, Naomi spoke, her tone gentle and polite. "Excuse me, could I have some water, please?" Lauren paused, glancing at Naomi with a dismissive look that spoke volumes. "I'll get to you when I can," she said curtly, walking past without a second glance. Naomi's calm gaze followed Lauren's retreating figure, but she remained silent. She wasn't going to engage in petty back and forth, but the disregard, the hostility, was beginning to build. What would you do if you noticed this kind of behavior? Would you step in or stay quiet? Let us know in the comments below. Minutes passed, and Naomi shifted slightly in her seat, trying to find a more comfortable position. She stretched one leg slightly into the aisle, a subtle movement, unassuming. But Lauren, who had returned with her tray in hand, saw this and immediately changed her path. Instead of walking around Naomi, she deliberately moved closer. In a split second, Lauren's foot struck Naomi's leg. The tray of water tilted, sending the glasses crashing to the floor and splashing across Naomi's lap. Lauren gasped theatrically, her voice sharp and loud enough for the entire cabin to hear. "Watch where you're putting your legs," she snapped. "You've caused a mess." The passengers turned, startled by the sudden commotion. Naomi looked up, her expression momentarily startled but composed. She calmly brushed at the water on her trousers and replied, "But you walked into my leg." Naomi's tone remained even, and with a slight tilt of her head, she added, "I've only asked to be treated with the same respect as everyone else, and if that's too much to ask, then maybe you're the one who doesn't belong here." The words hung in the air, a quiet but powerful rebuke that seemed to momentarily stun the entire cabin. Lauren's face flushed bright red with anger, and she stepped closer, her frustration boiling over. "You think you can talk to me like that?" Lauren hissed, her voice sharp and filled with venom. But the next moment something shocking occurred. Unable to contain her fury any longer, Lauren raised her hand and slapped Naomi across the face. The sound of the slap echoed through the cabin, sharp and shocking, as though a thunderclap had erupted in the air. Gasps rippled through the passengers. The businessman, who had been a silent witness until now, stood halfway, his face a mix of disbelief and fury. Grace, the junior flight attendant, flew her hands to her mouth, eyes wide with horror. Even the nosy socialite, who had been the first to pass judgment on Naomi, now appeared visibly taken aback, her earlier smirk replaced by a look of unease. Naomi slowly straightened in her seat, her hand resting calmly on her lap. Her expression remained unchanged, her gaze steady and unwavering as she looked up at Lauren. The silence in the cabin was deafening, the air thick with tension. For the first time, Lauren hesitated. Naomi's voice, calm but filled with quiet authority, sliced through the stillness. "You just made the worst mistake of your life." The words hit Lauren like a shockwave, and for a moment, her confidence faltered. The realization that Naomi was not the person she had presumed her to be seemed to settle in. Naomi didn't flinch or touch her face. She didn't raise her voice. She simply sat there, her eyes holding an unspoken power that made Lauren hesitate, something Naomi had done without even trying. What would you do if you were in Naomi's shoes? Let us know in the comments below. Naomi straightened her posture, her words deliberate and firm. I've been patient with you, she said quietly, her voice calm but cutting. But your behavior has crossed the line. Lauren's jaw clenched. Her expression darkened and her hands balled into fists at her sides. Crossed the line? She snarled, her voice rising. You're the one who's been disruptive since you got on this plane. Naomi's gaze didn't waver, her demeanor still unshaken by Lauren's venomous outburst. Naomi reassures the passengers, emphasizing that such behavior will not be tolerated and that all future passengers will be treated with dignity and respect. As the plane lands, Naomi's assistants are waiting, and she is briefed about her next meeting. Naomi recognizes the young flight attendant, Grace, who had quietly supported her, and promises her a promotion. The situation becomes a turning point as Naomi's firm leadership sets the standard for her airline. The incident quickly goes viral, with Naomi's actions widely praised on social media for her grace, authority, and commitment to respect. In a subsequent interview, Naomi shares her message. Respect is a right, not a privilege, and true leadership is about upholding dignity for all, regardless of assumptions. Later, Naomi boards another flight where the atmosphere has changed. The crew greets her warmly, showing that her influence has permeated the airline. Naomi's actions not only resolve the conflict on the plane, but spark a wider conversation about respect, leadership, and equality. She implements new policies to ensure all passengers are treated respectfully, no matter their background. Naomi's leadership inspires others to reflect on their actions and biases, with hashtags like Respect Above All and Naomi's Vision trending on social media. As Naomi continues her journey, she reflects on how standing up for herself led to a broader cultural shift, both within her airline and in society. Her vision is clear. Success is defined by how people are treated, not by wealth or status. Naomi's journey of leadership and respect has only just begun. Naomi Williams, a composed and powerful woman, faces a tense situation on a flight after flight attendant Lauren treats her rudely, assuming she is just another regular passenger. Naomi remains calm, but when Lauren's arrogance escalates, Naomi reveals her true identity. She is the owner of the plane and the airline. This revelation shatters Lauren's false confidence, and Naomi calmly confronts her, making it clear that Lauren's mistreatment not only harmed her, but also damaged the airline's reputation. Naomi demands that Lauren be fired and arrested for assaulting her in front of witnesses. The passengers watch in shock as Lauren is escorted off the plane in handcuffs.